Today on Mondays with Mo, we're going to be taking a look at 2006's Black, developed by Criterion Games and published by Electronic Arts, originally releasing for the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. Now, this game has not been remastered, re-released, or ported to the PC. The only way to play it is on a PlayStation 2, an Xbox, or, thankfully, on some modern hardware, because this is a backwards compatibility game on the Xbox One. You can buy it digitally through the Microsoft Store for $9.99, or you can pick up a physical copy of the game somewhere on the web, install it into your Xbox One, and give it a go for yourself. Now, Black is a very interesting study. It's one of my all-time favorite games because of the things it attempted to do, because of the ways it attempted to innovate within the first-person shooter genre. But it's also not a very spectacular video game. As a whole, when we talk about all the components that make a great game, Black has neglect in a lot of areas of its design. I think because there was such a strong focus on its audiovisual presentation and its destructive effects. This was Criterion's answer to Burnout for the first-person shooter. Criterion, of course, at that time, had already developed multiple entries in the Burnout franchise. Most recently, in 2004, 2 years prior, they had released Burnout 3 Takedown to rather critical acclaim. And today, I think Burnout 3 Takedown is considered one of the greatest entries in the Burnout franchise. The team at Criterion looked at Black and said, we want to do for the first-person shooter what we were able to do for the arcade racer with Burnout, specifically Burnout 3 Takedown. So they built this game around this concept of destructible environments, around creating many effects that really showcased the destruction the player was dealing to the environment around them. Black is a game that lets players reach out and interact with their environment, not through their hands or through holding the X button to pick an object up off of the ground, but through the ammunition that they actually fire out of the many firearms the game gives them. And that's where it excels. That's where Black blew me away. That's where I fell into the hype for Black, even as a game that was releasing, well, already at the end of the life cycle for the original Xbox and PlayStation 2. In 2006, February 24th, 2006, when Black released, the Xbox 360 had already been out and released last year, 2005, November 22nd here in the United States, and it was already out in both the EU in Europe and Japan by the end of that year. So Black, much like Gun and other games that were kind of riding the end of that old hardware, was sitting there to sort of bridge the gap. But nonetheless, I bought it because there was just something about the marketing, something about the gameplay that we saw that grabbed my attention. And I think the thing for me, and the thing that clearly Criterion and Electronic Arts knew they wanted to market, were the firearms themselves. You see, the rest of Black, when you look at its environments, isn't really spectacular. It's as if they took all of the poly counts, the textures, every bit of power they had in the original Xbox, which was a pretty powerful piece of hardware, and even the PlayStation 2, and they put it all into the firearms, which makes a lot of sense. It's a first-person shooter. What is the first thing the player sees? What is the thing that the player sees time and time again as they're taking down targets and completing objectives, and in this case, destroying the environment? They see the firearm. So they put a lot of work into all of the weapons you see in Black, from the Uzi to the AK to the 40mm grenade launcher on your M16. You know, all of the detail is in the firearms themselves and how they recoil, the sound they make when you shoot them, and the destruction that they deal on the environment before the player. They also kind of exaggerate the size of the firearms, the scale and the perspective of them to add to the experience. And that's another neat little trick that Black does that always impressed me. There's a lot going on with its audiovisual presentation. For example, when the player gets low on health, the screen goes black and white. You start to hear your heartbeat, and time slows down, almost giving you the opportunity to recover from overwhelming odds. And they even made use of the rumble in the controllers to sort of match that portion of a heartbeat as it slowed down. There's a lot of really nice, beautiful details here. And one could actually say that the team at Criterion was doing the audiovisual detail at Electronic Arts before anyone else, before DICE came into the picture and really started to go all out with Bad Company and, you know, really build the Battlefield franchise into this sort of audiovisual masterpiece that we know it as today. The team would even take audio clips from very popular films. They took Bruce Willis's MP5 from Die Hard, Jack Bauer's pistol from 24, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Uzi in True Lies, and they used it to sort of build the audio platform that we see inside of Black. They wanted players to, in a lot of ways, feel like they were living out those action films that they had that they've potentially grown up with or, spend so much time watching. And I think they did an amazing job with that. Audio-visual presentation of the firearms and the way the firearms interact with the world will always be my favorite part of Black, and the one area in which the game truly, truly excels. Because honestly, after that, there's a few special bits here and there, but the rest of it really does start to fall short, especially when you compare it to other shooters that would release shortly after Black, before Black, or in the same time period as Black. The gameplay as a whole, in terms of its environmental design and just the things that the player gets to do, is on a very simplistic level. It doesn't tell a spectacular story. You play a Black Ops soldier. I mean, that's pretty much it. There's some characters, there's a bit of storytelling through the game's live action cutscenes as you're being investigated, but there's not a whole lot else. The environments are hit and miss, and I think the environments that I remember enjoying the most were the ones where I got to blow the most amount of stuff up. Where the game really showcased what it was doing with its engine and just how impressive that destruction was on a piece of hardware like the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. That's always the thing that will impress me, because not long after the release of Black, Fear would come out, but on the Xbox 360 and of course Windows PC, and Fear would do some pretty cool things with environmental destruction, but it never took it to the level that Black did. Black really did, for me, showcase a game for the very first time where I could rip huge chunks of just content, in-game content, off of walls. It was a really spectacular piece of game design for that reason. And Black would actually go on to win a BAFTA award just for its general industry excellence in design, as well as for best audio in 2006. The developers at one point in time described Black as gun porn. And I think everything that we just talked about and everything that you see if you decide to boot up and play Black falls 100% in line with that. The firearms are first and foremost in terms of audiovisual presentation and just the quality of their existence on screen, and everything else just kind of exists as a backdrop for you to deal destruction with those firearms. It's quite a fun game. It doesn't control particularly well, and even in 2006, when it released, it wasn't the most enjoyable game to play, I remember, in terms of actually shooting and moving around. Like, yeah, shooting stuff, you can pull the trigger, you shoot stuff, but actually aiming and moving through the environments felt slow and chunky. It's a very old, traditional first-person shooter. But the thing was, at that point in time, we had other old, traditional first-person shooters like Halo that were just doing their first-person controls a little bit better, which always made Black a bit of a difficult game for me to play and truly enjoy beyond, again, that destructive nature. I do think, however, if you're interested in game design and seeing where games have come from, especially if you're someone who maybe didn't grow up during that generation, never played a lot of games on the Xbox, it is way worth the $10 or whatever you pay for it out on the web to play it in backwards compatibility. It's a fun game that demonstrates a very early example of innovation within the audio visual design of video games. Some of the earliest instances of, hey, here's destruction, and there are other games doing destruction, don't get me wrong. Obviously, we have to look to games like Red Faction and stuff like that, but this kind of existed in that same time period, and it just did things in a way that no other game before had done them. It's special because it took risks and it tried to do something new, and I will always applaud Criterion for stepping probably way out of their comfort zone, going from a racer to a shooter and saying, let's blow some shit up. I think they blew some shit up pretty well. And Black is worth checking out if you're interested in seeing, where games have come from. You won't be impressed, especially if you've played a lot of modern games, Siege, all these games that do all the things Black was trying to do, except in a much higher fidelity. But it's a prime example of just how far games have come in such a short period of time, and where the origins of a lot of the things we see in games and often take for granted actually came from. Thank you guys so much for watching. And we might have a bit of a follow-up to this one next week, because you see, Black actually had a sequel planned at one point in time. Stuart Black, one of the lead designers in the game, did have plans for Black 2, but he kind of got into it with EA, and him and many people who worked on Black at Electronic Arts at Criterion would leave, and they would go work for Codemasters, yet another studio known for their racing games, to make a game in 2013 called Body Count, which would essentially be the spiritual successor to Black. That's a different story for a different day, though. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.